Good Monday, everybody. Welcome to Charting with Dan. I'm your host, Dan Murrell. Joining me, Lon Harris.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Lon? How was your Super Bowl Sunday?
Riveting. Exciting.
Yes.
Watching the game. I did not watch the game. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I caught up with the commercials afterwards.
It was actually a riveting and exciting game, I thought.
I'm sure
And then I watched The Masked Singer afterwards, which was also riveting and exciting in its own way.
Who's that kangaroo? Gotta find out.
There's one coming up called Night Angel that I'm very curious about. But this is not about The Masked Singer.
We'll do the Masked Singer show another time.
Yet. This is about the box office. And Lon, traditionally, the Super Bowl weekend, one of the worst box office weekends of the year here in North America, because most people are at home watching football, getting ready to host parties. No exception this year, although there was a movie that opened this week that sort of redefined bad openings in a way. We're going to talk about that. That's kind of the main centerpiece of our show, but we're not quite there yet. Let's look at the movies that were in the top 5. And for a third week, Bad Boys for Life stays at the #1 spot. It is soon going to pass for Martin Lawrence Wild Hogs as his biggest domestic hit.
Wow. Delightful. He must be happy.
And
he doesn't have to say Wild Hogs is his #1 anymore.
Yes, exactly. Now Bad Boys for Life will be Martin Lawrence's biggest world domestic hit. It's already his biggest worldwide hit. As a matter of fact, it passed Bad Boys 2 to become the highest grossing worldwide entry in the series thus far, although there's inflation and all that stuff. But there you go. So Martin Lawrence soon to have a new #1, both domestic and worldwide with Bad Boys 2. Will Smith has a few, as you can imagine, above that, but still. 1917 stays in the #2 slot. It has a gross that is approaching $120 million domestically. Of course, it is a front runner now. There was another slew of awards. It won the BAFTA. It won Best Director at the BAFTAs. So it looks to be pretty firmly in the leading position as we enter Oscar Sunday, which is this Sunday, because everything is just so compressed now. So that's good for 1917. It is approaching $120 million domestically. It's doing well also worldwide, but it's approaching $120 million domestically. If it gets to, as it's approaching 120, as it passes 120, it's going to become the highest grossing Best Picture winner if it wins. Since Argo, back in 2012, we mentioned that I think a week or two ago. But if it can get to $140 million, which again, if it wins Best Picture and is still in theaters, which is looking like it's very likely, it'll probably get a nice little boost. If it gets past $140 million domestically, it will best The King's Speech to become the highest Best Picture grosser domestically since Return of the King in 2003.
Wow.
Lon, can you believe that? So the 17 years, the biggest, highest Best Picture winner in 17 years. If it can probably take that award and get that little box office bump, or honestly, maybe even if it doesn't, it's close enough.
That's remarkable. I mean, I feel like it didn't used to be that way. It's like the rise of the indies and all of these, smaller sort of films have made these Best Pictures. Often you get, your Shape of Waters, your Moonlights,
Hurt Locker.
You're right.
Spotlight, Birdman.
Yeah,
much
but now
smaller movies.
Like this is sort of back to an era when like these big, event movies, war movies, and historical dramas used to win.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens with 1917. I'm sure we're going to be recapping that right here a week from today, the day after the Oscars.
Whoever wins, we'll talk about.
Whomever wins. It looks like 1917 is in the driver's seat, but we've seen up to and even after the announcement of Best Picture that things can change.
things can
change at any time. I wait till the closing credits to roll on the Oscars.
And we just on this show, we've been talking about the front runner long enough it used to be The Irishman. It was Once Upon a Time for a while. So who knows?
These things can change.
Anybody's game.
Anybody's game. We'll see what happens this Sunday. Doolittle stays in third place domestically. And Lon, a little bit of a clarification, really, as the postmortem continues on Doolittle, at least domestically.
More
here in
a clarification than a correction.
More a clarification, but we talked about the dragon farting and how it was added to boost reportedly.
It's not just farting. It's like they have to go into the.
Well, it's like a dragon enema,
right? And they have to get the bagpipes out of the dragon,
and then the dragon farts,
right?
In Robert Downey Jr.'s face, and I have as happens, and I have expressed sympathy for Robert Downey Jr. because he signed on to this Doolittle movie, and then they add this stuff where the dragon farts in his face. Turns out, according to reports this week, dragon farting, his idea.
Yeah. He came bold to come up with that one.
I guess
on the
I
set.
felt sorry for him for no reason because that was apparently his idea. So.
Yeah, there was a great piece, I believe it was Hollywood Reporter, that was like here's the breakdown of what happened with Doolittle and the Trouble production, and this was a tidbit in it.
Which you never know. There could have been some source with a grudge that's trying to frame Robert Downey Jr. for the Dragon
and
Farting.
RDJ's team did not confirm this story, and they were like, they didn't comment.
So I
we
should
don't know.
say the Dragon Farting reportedly Robert Downey Jr.'s idea.
Allegedly.
However, someone with a vendetta or someone who wants to pass the buck on the Dragon Farting could be trying to pin this on RDJ.
Yeah.
I look forward to the Netflix series that I'm going to produce about this.
I'd love to see just a recreation of him pitching this on the set, trying to get people excited about it.
Well, didn't quite work, either on the set or in the theaters, at least here. In the US.
We don't know what it was like before. Maybe this was still an improvement.
Maybe it was an improvement.
We can't know.
Gretel and Hansel switched the names, but could still the name switch was only good for a 4th place opening. Audiences are very unkind this year. C- cinema score, not an F, but again, a C-. Audiences are not very happy with a lot of these films coming out this year.
Yeah, this one, I haven't seen this yet. I'd like to, but I read some reviews, and it does seem like it fell into that A24 artsy horror sort of trap where it's advertised as a straight ahead horror film. It's a little bit more
meditative,
ponderous, thoughtful, a little slow, more about atmosphere than scares. And I think that while some horror fans have really liked it, I think a lot of the mainstream audience got kind of turned off and bored with it.
Well, that trick will only work 20 or 25 times.
Yeah, it's a little bit of they come at night.
Exactly. They come at night, you name it. Hereditary, Mother,
a lot of
so many that have been
and they're not, it's a shame because these are not necessarily bad films. A lot of them, once everybody gets a look at it, their reputations improve. It's just when you sell people on one particular kind of movie, that's what they show up expect.
And as we've said, cinema score is a measurement above all things of expectation.
Exactly.
There's actually a switch there at the number 5 spot. When the estimates came in, it was The Gentleman from Guy Ritchie, but at Jumanji: The Next Level actually edged in back in the top. Well, I don't think it ever left the top 5, but it briefly left the top 5 when the estimates came in, but still now in the top 5 again. Rise of Skywalker's long gone.
Yeah,
Jumanji's still hanging around.
Mid-December.
Yeah,
it's
still
crazy.
People like the Jumanji.
They love it.
Lon, per theater, so looking at the box office picture, not on a big scale, but on a per theater scale, The Assistant. $19,785, playing in only 4 theaters nationwide. This is the narrative film debut of Kitty Green, who wrote and directed the film. She's achieved a lot of success in the documentary field. Julia Garner, who you were saying you enjoyed her work, she's an Emmy winner for Ozark.
She's great on Ozark.
She stars as an assistant, the assistant featured in the title, I'm assuming.
It's like loosely based on the Harvey Weinstein case from the perspective of an executive's assistant.
Yes, very the dark side of Hollywood, obviously a very relevant topic as the Harvey Weinstein trial plays out with so many bizarre developments.
One we literally can't talk about.
One we cannot talk about, but was just, I don't even know what's going on. Anyway, that was picked up by Bleecker Street last year coming out of the Telluride Film Festival. It's the Purse Theater average winner for this week. Lon, let's take a look at the numbers from around the world. First of all, our newish international chart. So this is the box office everywhere but North America, everywhere else around the world. Now, Lon, this was a time when this chart would be dominated probably by films in China, but the Chinese film industry remains shut down. Not just the theaters, but I was reading today, the actual production, physical production has been shut down in China as they are still dealing with the coronavirus crisis there. So Bad Boys for Life stays at number 1 internationally, followed by 1917, Doolittle there at number 3, and then a couple of Oscar holdovers, Little Women there at number 4, and then Jojo Rabbit, which is rolling out to some international markets at number 5.
And Jojo Rabbit was actually one that was going to open this week in China, so it probably would have done even better. But the Chinese cinema.
And we're actually going to update that what we did last week, looking at those dates. After let's take a look quickly at the worldwide picture. This is all countries, including North America. So worldwide, Bad Boys number 1, 1917 number 2, Doolittle number 3, but then Jumanji: The Next Level, because it's still doing well here domestically, is there still at number 4, and then it's Little Women, which was 4th place on the international chart, is 5th place on the worldwide chart. Again, this would be a much different different story and a different situation. But Lon, as we mentioned, the theaters across China remain closed. And we mentioned last week that there were several Hollywood films, imports who had release dates coming up that were in jeopardy because nobody knows yet when exactly movie theaters are going to reopen. And then when they do, when these movies, all of these big movies that were supposed to come out that are made in China are going to be rescheduled. Well, according to reporting industry-wide, also Gavin Feng, who's on Twitter, who is a great source for Chinese box office information. I rely on a lot of that information. These announcements have come through. Reportedly, this is in just 1 week since last week. This is how those release dates have been affected. As you mentioned, Jojo Rabbit was set to be released in China coming up. That opening has been delayed. Little Women opening has been delayed. 1917's opening has reportedly been delayed. And then Doolittle, we talked about the fact that Doolittle needs a big worldwide gross.
Really
as of right now, reportedly, the opening for Doolittle has been delayed. The other two films that we mentioned, scheduled still to open in late February as of right now, Marriage Story and Sonic the Hedgehog. But again, as this crisis goes on and we don't know the status of the Chinese film industry, those dates could change as well. So Lon, that ripple effect we talked about last week is already manifesting in these films losing their Chinese release dates. And we don't know when or if they're going to be rescheduled at this point. And as we mentioned last week, obviously the human factor, the most important element of this crisis. But these are the after effects that we're going to see moving forward once it's resolved, hopefully very soon.
And it does help you to conceive of the magnitude of this crisis in some ways. Think about it. I mean, we've never had, since I've been alive, never had a situation like this in the U.S. where everything just kind of stops. The whole world shuts down so everybody can stay home so you don't catch this illness. Yeah. It's unprecedented as far as in my life.
Yeah, I mean, here in the United States, you're right. I can't imagine nothing of this magnitude or this nature really
it feels
happened.
Apocalyptic in some ways.
It does. It does. So we will obviously keep our eyes on what's happening in China. And then as I said, hopefully soon as this crisis passes and they start reopening everything, it will be very interesting to see how this recovery happens, because they're already estimating over $1 billion in losses potentially to the global box office. We'll see what happens.
I was interested also to see Marriage Story getting a theatrical release date because they don't have Netflix in China. You can't get a Netflix subscription, so the big Netflix movies have to open theatrically. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So we will continue to track that story here, and as I said, a lot of great reporting coming out from sources around the world on that part of the business. As we keep feeling the impacts worldwide of what's happening in China. So Lon, there is a movie that opened this week that actually set the kind of box office record that you don't want, and it's a movie that we briefly mentioned last week called The Rhythm Section, starring Blake Lively. We mentioned that audience awareness maybe not that high. The title itself a bit confusing.
Sounds like it's going to be like a Whiplash.
Like a Whiplash type. Yeah, exactly.
Like drummers
film.
At school.
Well, the Rhythm Section actually ended up posting the worst opening for any film that ever opened on 3,000 or in 3,000 or more theaters ever. As you can see, the Rhythm Section opening to just over $2.7 million. And this is as wide as they track releases just about. They may add 4,000 theaters, but The Seeker, The Dark is Rising, that was on a chart that we did, I think, for a smaller screen number. It may have been 2,000 or more. But then there's apparently a movie called Fun Size, and then a movie called Burnt with Bradley Cooper, which I wonder, I would have to go back and look, but I found a teaser poster for it, and it was originally called Adam Jones. And I wonder if all of the NFL drama around Adam Pac-Man Jones
I bet that was
caused them to change the name of the movie.
Is Burnt based on an Anthony Bourdain book? I feel like it might be. I'm going to look this up.
It may be. I know it was about. I know it was the chef movie that wasn't Chef and that nobody saw.
He plays like a badass chef or something.
Yeah, he's like he's cool chef. Anyway, didn't do well. But
written by Stephen Knight.
Written by Stephen Knight. Yeah, directed by I think John Wells, who is a very decorated television director.
All right, I might be thinking of a different thing because I don't think this one is
perhaps
based on the
so.
book.
But that is now down to number 5. So yeah, for films that open in 3,000 or more theaters, the Rhythm Section posted the worst opening for a release of that magnitude. And so as we do on the show, and as I mentioned, Super Bowl weekend, kind of slow, but I like to dissect these things because you don't see this kind of thing very often. I know every week it seems like, oh, there's a this thing or there's a that thing, but this kind of failure to open a film on this scale is somewhat rare. So I wanted to kind of go through the story of the Rhythm Section and then maybe posit some ideas for what could have caused this. So first of all, a little bit of background. If you didn't know about the Rhythm Section, and I did not, I was not aware of really anything about this movie, which is probably part of why it didn't do
There
great.
was a trailer that was floating around that I watched. It was some sort of, it looked like Jason Bourne, but with Blake Lively.
Right. Well, the Rhythm Section was originally picked up in 2017 by Paramount as a potential franchise starter.
Oh boy.
It was based on a novel by Mark Burnell, and Mark Burnell wrote a series of novels. This was the first one featuring the main character. Burnell was also hired to write the screenplay of his own novel, which sometimes that works out great. You get a Gillian Flynn with Gone Girl, but sometimes not so much. And they didn't really screen this very widely, so I actually haven't had a chance to see the Rhythm Section, but I was reading some of the reviews, and a lot of people cited the screenplay potentially, and you know, people tend to think if someone's a writer that they just write everything, but like screenwriting and book writing, two different skill sets, particularly if you're a first-time screenwriter going into adapting your own work. That's a difficult thing to ask anyone to do.
There's also some of that, you know, like sometimes an outside perspective, you could be like, well, this worked great in a book, but I think in a movie, we should cut that and it would work this way better. If it's your story and you've lived with it for years, if you've gone on to write a bunch more stories about this same character, it's so set in your head, you might not come up with those ideas. It's not like not being a better or worse writer. It's just, you know, like the different takes and different perspectives on the material.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, this is why a lot of the time when a movie comes out and it's unsatisfying to some fans, they immediately go into like, well, it's poorly written. That's just bad writing. And it's like, well, it can be more complicated than that.
And I think it may be a little bit more complicated. Something else, and we talked about the expectation game. The expectation game for a lot of people was also set when the producers of the film came on board as well. And this is a heavy-hitting production team. The producers, not executive producers, but producers of the film, Eon Productions, Barbara Broccoli, Michael Wilson, also probably most known for producing James Bond. The Broccoli family and the Wilson family, obviously a legacy of producing films for the James Bond franchise. They came on board to directly produce this film. Great to have production veterans on your team, but that did set the expectation game for a lot of people because this is a spy franchise, a spy type franchise, or what they wanted to turn into one. A lot of people thought, okay, this is going to be a James Bond type action heavy, high octane franchise, whereas the film as delivered, again, looking at the feedback, looking at the reviews, a little more contemplative, a little bit slower, a little bit of a different tone. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but as we talk about people responding to the expectations, I think a lot of people saw the producing team behind this movie, what they produced in the past, and thought, oh, this is like a female 007 type movie. Not exactly.
They were thinking Skyfall. It's maybe a little more Red Sparrow.
Right. Exactly. So the other thing we talk about, and sometimes this is force majeure. These are things you can't control, and this is always, you know, kind of. Every time that we dissect one of these films, it seems like, as far as like, oh, what happened? Why did it open so low? Or why did they sell the rights off? There's usually something in the production of the film or the production of another film that did a ripple effect, like we talked about with Annihilation, that they couldn't control, that affected the outcome. And something that, you know, we can talk about with this film is with Blake Lively. Blake Lively, the star of the film, suffered an injury on the set, suffered a hand injury in December 2017, shut down production for 5 months in the film. Now, this was a film that was scheduled to open in February of 2019. Reed Morano, who was the director of the film, she's a veteran, Emmy winner for The Handmaid's Tale. You know, said that this was a delay that benefited the film. But what it did do is affect the release date. Obviously, you push 5 months. You don't want to rush, particularly post-production. So it was set to be released in February of last year, February 2019. It would have been competing against How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, Alita, Lego Movie 2. Not... As it turns out, I mean, How to Train Your Dragon 3 did well. Lego Movie 2 was a disappointment. Alita was one of those borderline cases. But potentially in that window, given a different marketing campaign, it might have had a potential to at least open better than it did. It was originally rescheduled from February 2019 to November 2019. Yeah. However, that would have put it in that logjam with Knives Out, with Frozen 2. I don't know how well it would have fared in that window either. But again,
much more competitive to open in late November.
Exactly. Things like an injury, you can't control that. But it is a contributing factor when you talk about a film being delayed and a film moving release dates, etc. That was a contributing factor as well. The other thing that I think we have to acknowledge is in the interim period between the time the movie shut down production, resumed production, obviously was finished and then released. In that interim period, we saw in the marketplace a number of female-led films in the spy genre that underperformed critically or underperformed at the box office or underperformed both. You had The Girl in the Spider's Web, which was the new Elizabeth Salander movie. Yeah. You had Charlie's Angels, obviously most recently, that underperformed. You had The Spy Who Dumped Me, which I actually enjoyed.
I like that one a lot.
Underperformed at the box office. You had Red Sparrow, which you mentioned, another sort of female spy genre thriller that underperformed at the box office. So again,
we also have Black Widow in just a few weeks now.
Yes, we have anticipation building for Black Widow now. Not that all female-led spy movies should be lumped in together.
Not what I was saying.
No, but but the marketplace having had several examples of a female-driven film that did not perform financially. I think that sets a tone, and again, that's not this movie's fault, but it's the kind of contributing factor. It's not the only factor that could perhaps have worked against the movie because someone said, "Oh well, I saw Charlie's Angels and I saw a Girl in the Spider's Web, and I don't think I need to see that." We talk about how that's not necessarily a great line of thinking, but that is sometimes the consumer method of thinking. Sure. People think that way about comic book movies. People think that way about just about every genre.
Well,
horror movies.
We in this room we see a lot of movies. We're not very discriminating, but for a lot of people, they only go out and see so many movies, especially in theaters, a year.
Yes.
And they're selective. If they just saw something that kind of looks like this, they want to go see something else.
Exactly.
Or he got to choose last time and wanted to go see Charlie's Angels, and now she gets to pick and wants to go see Jumanji again.
Yeah, which is
some
a lot of people are still
Jumanji
going.
a bunch of times.
Exactly.
We know you're out there.
Something else that we have to, I think, needs to be brought up is name and brand recognition. The rhythm section, as I mentioned, it's a series of novels, a Stephanie Patrick series of novels. That's the character's name. The first one, the rhythm section, was first published in 1999, so that's 21 years ago. The last book in the series, the fourth book, published in 2006, so 14 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, when you have a title like the rhythm section, it doesn't quite fit the genre of the film. I think if you don't want to change the name of the film, then you're hoping that people associate it with that series of books. But I also think that having a series of books that's 2 decades old hurts that recognition, because for a lot of people that may have heard about them but not read them, or perhaps read them but they're kind of in the rearview mirror, there's not that same kind of recognition when you have a title, and titles are important. If people are confused or sort of like don't know what's going on with your movie with the title, then I think sometimes that can lead to just sort of like I don't know what that's about.
Sure, I mean there's a name recognition things that happen with best-selling books, even if you haven't actually read them. Yeah. If you're adapting books that are coming out now and hitting a chord and showing up in bestseller lists, that's titles that are out there in the world that people are going to be like, oh, I've heard of The Girl on the Train, or right. Whereas if you're adapting 20-year-old books that aren't quite as relevant and aren't going to be out in the marketplace as much, it's an uphill battle. I mean, we make fun a lot of titles where they try to work in both the character name and the title, like Jack Reacher or Never Look Back or whatever.
But that's why they do that.
But that's why. Then we're now seeing an example of that's why they do that. Because if you don't do that, a lot of people don't get that character's in that story.
Well, I mean, we talked about, I think the official title for the Claire Foy's Dragon Tattoo movie is like The Girl in the Spider's Web, a new dragon tattoo story. But that's why, because people, they lose that kind of recognition. They lose that hook to them as time goes by. They want to make sure. I don't know if that was necessarily underscored in a lot of the promotional materials, particularly as you're broadcasting to the wide audience. So I think that's a contributing factor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw it. We were talking about this just the other day. You had Kiss the Girls and you had all those. But then when they rebooted it, Alex Cross. Because they don't want you to get confused.
It's about Alex Cross. It's about that.
He's the detective and his name is Alex Cross.
And by the way, that didn't work either.
It did not. But I think there were other issues there.
Yeah, well,
I think there were other problems. They're going to do it again as an Amazon show.
And by the way, the quality of the film, I can't speak to it. Audiences weren't. Rhythm section. Audiences weren't particularly enamored with it. I think a C+ cinema score. Critics weren't particularly enamored with it. So obviously, a contributing factor, the quality of the film, word of mouth. But then something else that could really be actively working against it, the Super Bowl. Super Bowl weekend is traditionally one of the worst, if not the worst, box office weekends here in North America. It was moved from November to this weekend, reportedly, again, due in part to the fact that Blake Lively wanted to be active, wanted to promote the film. She had a child with Ryan Reynolds, their third child together back in October, and it was reported that they moved the film back a little bit to accommodate her schedule so that she could take the time that she wanted and needed. And then could go out and promote the film. And again, that's a factor that you don't factor in when you're when you don't realize when you're making a movie, you're not we're gonna have to push to our second release date, and then when that release date comes, we're gonna we want to accommodate this schedule, so we're gonna push it. You don't think, and then you end up on Super Bowl weekend. Yeah, one of the worst box office weekends of the year. Now you could ask why Paramount would choose to open it on a really bad weekend. That's a valid question. There were reports that they saw test screenings and weren't particularly confident in what the film would do, and so stripped back on the production and advertising budget and just sort of dumped it again.
Yeah, but they're also in the problem of, but if you don't pick Super Bowl weekend, where are you moving it? Because next week
Harley
you've got
Quinn.
A big female-led action movie, and then once you're past next week and the next few weeks, you're into the spring season. Big stuff's opening every weekend. It's like it's getting very hard to move stuff around and have a late weekend open that's a good weekend that you're going to have a strong presence.
It really is. I mean, and that's why I say when you see something like this happen, and it's why I kind of like to pick these things apart, particularly a movie that's sort of this big, but that opens this small. It's usually not just one thing. If you pull on the thread, usually there are several other things that you can say, that might have had something to do with it, and that might have had something to do with it, and that might have had something to do with it. And I think that's one of my favorite things about doing the box office and doing this show is a lot of times it was just like, rhythm section, that was terrible. It didn't make any money. Again, a lot of people didn't care for it, obviously, based on the feedback, but I think you can look at the other factors and say, like, maybe the studio didn't do this, or maybe the studio didn't do that. Maybe they should have changed the title here. Maybe you bring on a different screenwriter. You had bad luck with an on-set injury that pushed production. There's so many different factors that if you just change one of them, it could have been a different story. That I think it's really fascinating to see. Like, it's not a science, and sometimes success and failure are complete accidents, or at least are set up by events that are completely out of anyone's control.
And I mean, if you think about it, quality obviously matters, and it's certainly in terms of whether a movie has legs. I mean, if audiences weren't enjoying Jumanji, it would not still be on our list every week. But opening weekend, people you don't know yet. Like the reviews, sometimes people disagree with the reviews. So these are decisions that are made before people have a good sense of this is a really good movie or this is a terrible movie.
It's a failure to connect on some level, whether that's through advertising, whether that's when you release the film. And those are the questions that I like to explore.
Yeah, and we're talking still even just when you're talking about this weekend in particular, you're talking really about Friday night and Saturday because, as we already said, Sunday's kind of a blowout. In the U.S., at least, people are waking up they're getting their 7-layer dips ready. Then it's game time. Then everybody's drunk and sleepy.
Yeah.
The whole day's a wash.
I don't know how many people like finished the game yesterday on the West Coast. They're like, let's go see Rhythm Section.
Woo! God, you need a nap.
No,
it's
people are
maybe
going
the
to bed.
Masked Singer and then a nap.
Yeah. Oh, definitely the Masked Singer. Are you kidding me? Of course it's the Masked Singer. Yeah. So anyway, Rhythm Section making the wrong kind of history, but as always, I like to ask why and look and investigate and look at the answers.
And sometimes these movies end up being good. Like it could come out on Blu-ray and be cool.
Yeah, that's
mean
the other
it's
thing.
bad. Yeah.
Box office success or failure, not the ultimate arbiter of
I
quality.
think sometimes people are hesitant to go see stuff because it bombed and it got that bad reputation. And then you go back and revisit it, you're like, this was not terrible.
No, as I mentioned, Spy Who Dumped Me, I
really like that one.
enjoyed it. It did not do very well.
That's really funny. I'll just say one word on that. I like it because it's really doing the spy movie stuff. It's not just a parody.
Right.
It's like violent. There's action.
It's a great action film.
Right.
Yeah. No, if you haven't seen The Spy Who Dumped Me, check it out.
Actually, like an action comedy that does both well.
Yeah, I liked it. All right, Lon, let's look at the year so far, 2020. Let's first look at the domestic box office. Bad Boys for Life and Doolittle, still number 1 and number 2. Like a Boss jumps up 1 spot to number 3. Really, 3 through 10 right now are just, it's like a war of attrition. Doesn't really matter. They're all going to be gone pretty soon.
Yeah.
The Grudge drops 1. It's going to be overtaken by The Gentleman pretty soon.
Dragging, though.
Well, you know, it's...
I would have thought a new Guy Ritchie with that cast would have done more than 20 mil.
Well, you know, we'll see. It's got a little bit of time to burn.
Yeah,
Underwater drops down 1. The Turning, Weathering with You, stay there. And then Gretel and Hansel and the Rhythm Section there for at least a week.
Yikes.
Then the Rhythm Section, though, will definitely be gone next week as we have a big release this upcoming Friday.
Harley's gonna knock that one.
Let's look at the 2020 worldwide picture. Bad Boys for Life, Doolittle, Tolo Tolo there at number 3. The Gentleman soon to be in that slot, jumping up there from number 4. Tanhaji, the Unsung Warrior from India there at number 5. That drops a slot. The Grudge and Underwater both dropping a spot. The Man Standing Next jumps up 1 spot. Like a Boss drops down again. Like a Boss is going to be gone probably next weekend because we're going to have a new entry on that list. And Lon, before we get to what that new entry is probably going to be, we should address our countdown to New Mutants. 61 days.
2 months.
Allegedly, until New Mutants comes out. There was no Super Bowl ad, Lon.
I noticed.
But there were a lot of movies that didn't have a Super Bowl ad, so I wouldn't take that as a sign.
Oh, that doesn't, that doesn't
as
mean
of
it's
now,
definitely not coming.
As of today, New Mutants still slated to be released. This could actually be happening.
Wow.
This could be happening.
Finally.
We'll see. Finally. We might be able to see it. But
get a look at like a season 4 era Maisie Williams.
Yes, exactly. She was in a Super Bowl ad yesterday.
Yeah.
Who would have thought the Maisie Williams Super Bowl ad would have come out before New Mutants?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Lon, we've been looking back at various key dates in New Mutants history because it's been a very long road, over 10 years since it was announced that it was being developed. So today we're going to a very important date, or what would have been a very important date in New Mutants history. It's original release date, which was April 13th, 2018, almost 2 years ago. So let's go back almost 2 years, Lon. April 9th, right around the original release date, the Bill Cosby trial began.
Sure.
Michael Cohen's office was raided. Remember Michael Cohen?
Oh, vaguely.
April 11th, Congressman Paul Ryan announces he won't run again. Remember that?
Good.
Paul Ryan. Then April 13th, the original New Mutants release date, Rampage ended up opening at number 1 there. Quiet Place at number 2 in its second week. And
love story.
You know what? It might have dodged a bullet there with maybe competing with A Quiet Place in the horror market. Then
also Rampage. People loved the rom-com about the Rock and his gorilla.
The Rock and his gorilla. Then just 2 days later, you had old Jimmy Comey saying the president shouldn't be impeached, and look where we are now. Then April 17th, the Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, win the Stanley Cup in their inaugural season. That same day, North and South Korea announcing the end of their impending war, and then on the 18th, Black Panther becomes the first film played in Saudi Arabia, ending a 35-year moratorium on wide releases there. So how does that seem further away ago than the 2009 one that we did last year?
I don't know. It
seems like a different world, doesn't it? Yeah,
it's been grueling.
But that was the world that was originally supposed to give birth to the New Mutants. It did not.
No.
We are still in a pre-New Mutants world, and who knows what the world's going to look like next week.
It's just weird how much X-Men stuff we've seen since then. A whole season of Legion, Dark Phoenix, the '90s cartoon is back on Disney Plus. It's a whole new X-Men environment.
So many other X-Men things have happened, and that was the first week. And next week we'll visit another key date in the development of New Mutants. We've now looked at the day it was announced, the day that we found out who was going to direct it, and now its initial release date. We'll continue to look at critical dates in New Mutants history as we countdown
maybe
to coming out. We'll see. As of now, still coming out. Definitely something that's coming out, Lon, and the only wide release of the weekend. WB, the DC EU.
No, I don't think we're doing that anymore. Right?
The DC Universe.
DC Films.
The DC Films is back with Birds of Prey. Parentheses, and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
I'm not saying that part.
Are you just calling it Birds of Prey?
I'm calling it Birds of Prey.
I don't know how I'm going to list it on the charts. I think it's just going to be like Birds of Prey and the ... because something. I'm not the text would be that big if I had to try. It's like Birdman.
It's fine.
Anyway, Birds of Prey,
We all know
opens in wide release this weekend. It is the only big release hitting theaters here in North America this weekend.
It's because I guess Carly's not, in the comic book, she's not officially one of the Birds of Prey. So
right. You want to get Harley Quinn in there.
You got to add Harley Quinn and make sure people know she's in there. It's just very long.
I mean, I think if they had their druthers, they would have just called it like Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey.
Yeah.
But Birds of Prey was already in development, and
Fast and Furious presents
Birds of Prey featuring Harley Quinn, whatever. But anyway, Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
That's it.
Hits theaters this week. That's the big release. That's what we're going to be leading with next week. Obviously, no matter what. What do you think, Lon? Think the folks will like it?
I don't know. I mean, it's a real question mark because with these DC movies now, it's sort of impossible to know because there's so much misinformation, there's so much rumor. It's always these conflicting, these biased. I heard this, I heard that.
Well, not just that, but like when I saw Shazam,
I thought it was
walked out
be
of
huge.
it thinking like, this is going to be one of the biggest hits of the year.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this movie is going to be massive. It's funny. It's got that light energy that people say that they enjoy. And then it came out, people just kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to think.
I find it very hard to predict. And I like Joker too. I was like, this is interesting. I'm sure it'll have a big opening week and people would be curious, but would you have guessed it was going to make $1 billion?
Not in a million years.
No way. So I'm finding it really hard to predict. I do think it's very clever that she just mastered figure skating and ice skating for I, Tonya. So we're like, let's put Harley Quinn on roller skates for an entire movie. She can do it.
She can do it.
Smart thinking.
She can balance.
It's very clever.
Margot Robbie can balance.
It feels very Harley Quinn. Yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll be talking about Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
You got to say all of it.
Right here.
Black Mask is in it too, and Mr. Zaz. How come they don't get it in the title?
Nope. So we hope you enjoy Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn. Lon and I will be weighing in on our thoughts on Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
I'm neither.
And Lon, thank you for joining me.
Always
Where can
a
the people
pleasure.
find you?
Go to Twitter at LONS. That's where to find me.
At LONS. I'm on Twitter too, at Murrell Dan. And we'll be right back here next week with all the news you need to know about Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn. We'll see you then.